Now, when Royal Enfield came out with the Meteor 350 a couple of years ago, back in 2020, well, that motorcycle changed the entire game as far as retro-themed cruiser tourer motorcycles were concerned. Because first and foremost, that came with the new J Series engine, that 349cc single-cylinder motor, which just added a whole new dynamic of refinement to the mix when compared to the older motorcycles that Enfield came out with. It had the new chassis, which, well, just made the bike a lot more engaging and easy to ride. And, well, the components used in the construction of that motorcycle, well, just came together so well and made the bike so desirable as a complete package. Well, today we are out here with the Super Meteor 650, a motorcycle that promises to take things to an even higher level in terms of cruiser and tourer motorcycles. This is the same motorcycle that previewed at EICMA last year, 2022, and we finally have a chance to test it out here in the princely state of Jaisalmer, Rajasthan. The perfect backdrop to test this motorcycle, because if you've been to this part of the country before, well, you will know that long flat stretches of tarmac, nice winding sections, all very easy to come by in this part of the country. So without wasting any more time, I'm just gonna bring a leg over the bike and tell you what it's all about. So let's get to it. Super Meteor 650 is a mighty fine looking motorcycle, to say the least. Now, on the design front, the RE exudes all the typical traits of a thoroughbred middleweight cruiser. The low stance, raked out front end that's made up of a big 19-inch alloy wheel that comes dressed with 100 by 90 section rubber. Now that's linked to a chunky 43mm upside down fork, the wide handlebar with a familiar offset part digital part analog instrument console with turn-by-turn tripper nav pod, that's standard fit. Moving to the back, you have a narrow midsection with a 15.7 litre tank between your legs, the blacked out engine casings, and its tail comprises a chunky 150 by 80 section 16-inch rear tire, and also some very neatly integrated LED lights on the fender, which give the bike a nice and broad compact tail section. Now, the new cruiser gets a lot of firsts for Royal Enfield too, like the upside down fork, which I mentioned earlier, the LED headlamp, the plated aluminum switch cubes that house RE's unique rotary switches, and finally the bike also gets these distinctive tank badges which undeniably add touches of old school finesse to this mix. And boy, do they look premium and brilliant. Now, electronic riding aids and features are the bare minimum out here, which according to me is just fine, because you do get just what you require when you're out on the road, and that includes dual channel ABS, a tripper navigation, the slipper clutch, an analog part of the display which reads out a reserve fuel trip reading, and a USB socket located beneath the left side panel. Now, just like before I go on, I should inform you that there are two variations of the Super Meteor 650 that you can choose from: the Super Meteor 650 Standard and the Super Meteor 650 Tourer. Now, the model you see here, which we are testing out this time around, is the latter, and this model comes kitted with a touring windscreen, a longer, broader touring seat with a pillion backrest, and it also sports one of two distinctive two-tone colorways. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's move on to the feel in the saddle. Alright, so swinging a leg over the Meteor 650, well, not too much of hassle. 740mm of seat height, not too bad to get a leg over. And as you can see, once you're in the saddle, a very nice, comfortable, laid-back position that the bike will make you assume, with the forward set foot pegs and the slightly tilted back handlebars. Very cruiser-like, very easy-going. And yes, the seat as well. This one is the top-end Celestial variant of the Meteor 650, which comes with a single-piece seat. The other lower variants, the Astral and the Interstellar, come with step seat. This unit in particular, single piece, and it has a longer section for your pillion rider. So your pillion will be a lot more comfortable with this seat on the motorcycle, and you also have the additional benefit of the pillion backrest. These bits will cost you extra on the lower variants. Now, this is the third motorcycle to be powered by the company's 648cc parallel twin engine, after the Interceptor 650 and the GT 650 models. But the Super Meteor 650 is the only thoroughbred cruiser style motorcycle of the lot. Now, at the heart of the Super Meteor 650 is that same highly refined 648cc parallel twin motor that we've seen previously in the Interceptor 650 and the GT 650 models. And although this motor produces the same amount of power and torque, which is around
47 PS of peak power and a little over 52 Nm of peak torque. Well, this motor is tuned to produce a lot more torque lower down the power band, just like a cruiser should.
The Super Meteor 650 feels very torquey from the get-go, and the engine feels a lot more tractable in this current setup. With the older RE650 twins, well, the level of refinement of the parallel twin motor was a real highlight. And much to my delight, the Super Meteor 650 hasn't compromised this level of refinement. You do still feel a pleasant rumble as soon as you fire up. The stock exhaust note, well, that's a bit mild, but it's pleasantly thrummy sounding when you up the pace a bit. Set off and you do feel some mild vibrations in the pegs too, but it feels lovely, just as a cruiser should. It doesn't isolate you from feeling a connection with the machine, and it gives you the feeling that you're riding a bike of quality and substance. The best part about the Super Meteor 650 state of tune is that now you can short shift at lower speeds and cruise along perfectly fine without the engine knocking in protest like it did on the older RE650 twins. There's plenty of grunt all across the band, and if you really want to get going at pace, well, this bike feels more than up for it. Although it might not be as quick as, say, the GT or the Interceptor 650 models, well, the Super Meteor 650 doesn't feel anywhere close to being sluggish. The Super Meteor 650 employs a new tubular spine frame and swing arm as opposed to the older steel frame chassis and swing arm of the older 650 models. And this architecture uses the motor as a stress member in the process. Besides being a lot heavier than the Interceptor 650, the Super Meteor's wheelbase is 100 mm longer, and with 135 mm of ground clearance, it does sit 39 mm lower to the ground in comparison. So it isn't as eager to change direction. But that doesn't mean that you'll find it difficult to alter your course when you're astride this bike. It's a cruiser motorcycle after all, and it all falls in sync very well, feeling every bit the part. The front end provides a good amount of feedback with the chunky upside down fork and its 120 mm of travel, absorbing bumps very nicely. While the twin shocks at the rear are set up stiff, just as you would expect on a thoroughbred cruiser bike. The bike takes to long sweeping corners like a fat kid to cape, tipping the Super Meteor 650 into long winding roads towards the dunes of Sam was an absolute delight. The bike held its line very nicely provided that the road was smooth. Small mid-corner bumps do feel a bit unsettling on account of the 1500 mm long wheelbase and the stiff rear suspension setup. A good thing here is that you will be able to tell the bike's strengths and weaknesses not long after you first set off because, well, its behavior is just so consistent. Barreling down open stretches of highway at triple-digit speeds are definitely in this bike's forte. Cruising at 100 to 120 kmph appears to come just so naturally to this bike, it feels like a casual walk in the park. And what's more is that you'll have more than enough juice to get past traffic moving at that speed very easily. Its mannerisms in a straight line are highly commendable. It just feels so planted at all speeds, and the rear doesn't even squirm out of sorts when you jam the brakes hard. While the disc at the front doesn't exactly lack bite, you will have to employ the rear brake too if you want to bring this bike to a halt fast. Now, although the 241 kg curb weight might seem like a lot to deal with, well, you really only feel that weight at slow speed or when you have to tiptoe in reverse or perch the bike on its center stand. Otherwise, it's all very manageable. Yes, and you'll want to completely slow down for speed breakers with a pillion aboard because the bike's underbelly can have a tendency to get scraped if you're not careful. As far as shortcomings go, well, the only bits that I found a bit off with this bike have to do with the standard Super Meteor 650 model. You see, with this variant, you have a narrower seat and the pillion seating area is quite tiny with low back support. Well, this could prove to be quite uncomfortable for two astride, especially over long distance rides. But there's no such problem with this touring variant though. Although at speeds in excess of 140 kmph, well, the wind did get past the visor and impact your helmet a fair bit, and there was a bit of bobbing about. So if I were to buy a Super Meteor 650, well, I think I'd go in for the standard model with the bigger add-on seat plus the backrest, but minus the windscreen. Features that come standard with the touring model.
Now, to sum things up out here with the Super Meteor 650, well, I'm happy to report that this motorcycle did in fact live up to my expectations of it in terms of ride and handling. The ride posture, very comfortable, easygoing, good for long distances. The motor, smooth and refined as they come, a good trait to have on your bike on a long distance journey. And yes, well, this Celestial variant, the seat on this one, very comfortable, and it should be so for your pillion rider as well. A couple of additional accessories you can slap on there as well, which should make your touring experience all the better. Now, the Meteor 350 seemed to be lacking in certain departments, especially when it came down to power and a 6-speed gearbox, because that motorcycle, well, producing 20 PS of power and a 5-speed gearbox, and the way it was all configured, well, cruising at speeds of around 70 to 80 kmph was in its forte. But if you wanted to go a little faster, well, that bike seemed to get out of breath, and yes, it just lacked a 6th gear, to be honest. So not so much so with the Super Meteor 650, because yes, the way this bike is set up, cruising at speeds of 100 to 120, just so fuss free, and it will relentlessly go about its business with utmost ease. And that is something you'll really appreciate once you actually hit these speeds out on the open highway. You will really fancy riding this bike out long distance more than in the city, because yes, the slower you ride it, its weight does come into play. 241 kgs, yeah, it is a bit tricky to handle at slow speed, especially when taking turns in the city. But out on the open highway, man, this thing just comes into its own, and you will really have a blast on this one.
And the icing on this Royal Enfield Space Cake has to be its pricing. Now, this pretty much blows away any competition that it will come against into the weeds. The standard Super Meteor model can be had for 3.49 lakh to 3.64 lakh ex-showroom India, depending on what colorway you choose, while the touring model, well, that can be had for around rupees 3.79 lakh ex-showroom India.